Well, sources tell me it's, with Scott Perry taking over as a GM in New York and now Steve Mills moving up to president, they felt that Phil Jackson had devalued Carmelo.
No.
Right.
No way. You're kidding. That trashing your own star player for 6 straight months really weakens his value on the market? Who could have seen that coming?
It had an impact on the market.
Oh, my gosh. The things you learn on this show.
They paused, they paused the trade talks when they were getting close with Scott to get that deal done.
Right.
They're going to reset those trade talks, and they're going to try to see, they're going to create the illusion in New York that they might bring Carmelo back. Carmelo sent a pretty clear message to that group already. Let's continue down this path and get a deal done. And he had waived his no trade for both Houston and Cleveland. And sources told me over the weekend, Houston had become they'd become the primary focus for Melo. Cleveland was secondary. And it gets back to that Chris Paul trade. The moment Chris Paul got to Houston, that's what ignited this opportunity for the Rockets to get him. And, the players' impact in this league and recruiting. James Harden had tremendous impact to get Chris Paul there, and Chris Paul potentially is going to have a tremendous impact in getting Melo to tell New York, this is the only place I want to go get this deal done.
Yeah, and look, we know that Chris and Melo talk all the time. You've got also players in other places. CJ McCollum trying to wield his influence. He's on social media, putting Melo in a Photoshop jersey, all of that stuff. How much of a sense are you getting, A, that Portland is really interested in Melo, and B, that the players are involved in recruiting him?
As one GM who was in this process said to me, this has become the AAU NBA model, which is you're using your players to recruit. And Portland's players are reaching out to Melo. Portland would love to get involved in this and become a team that Melo would consider. And you look at the infrastructure in Portland of CJ McCollum, Dame Lillard, and Jusuf Nurkic in the middle. Carmelo on that team, and Portland feels if you plugged Melo into our team, we're as good as anyone outside of Golden State in the West. And as sources tell me, Portland, New York and Houston tried to pull Portland into a 3-way, really a potentially 4-way deal. Portland does not have any interest in helping Houston, a conference rival, get Carmelo Anthony. They would like for Carmelo to waive his no trade and go to Portland, but right now that's not something Melo's considering.
What do you think Melo's perspective is on all of this? Should he trust the Knicks that they're going to get this done for him in the right way?
No. They burned him so bad. I think he needs to stick to his guns. Put his foot on their neck and force them to get this trade done. He needs to go to somewhere else where he can start over. They showed him how they feel. They allowed Phil to bash him. They allowed Phil to devalue his worth. There's no reason he needs to be in New York. He needs to go get a better start with Houston, get a chance to possibly get to a championship, and that's what he should do.
Of course, the numbers are part of all of this, right? And then getting rid of that Ryan Anderson contract.
What's the issue?
One of the big stoppers, right?
Well, and it's amazing because that Ryan Anderson contract 1 year ago was a good contract. Now it's a toxic contract. Now you've got to add a couple of draft picks probably to that. And this is a complicated process. I look at it as a jigsaw puzzle. The pieces don't fit right now. The no trade clause, we haven't even talked about the trade kicker, $8.1 million probably will be waived here. Right. So it's a complicated, how do we get a third team? I'm in the belief I think it's still going to go the buyout route.
Really?
I think there will come to a point where there's not going to be a market for Carmelo, or there won't be a deal for New York that they like, and they're going to go to Carmelo and Leon Rose's agent and say, what is the number to get you out of your contract? Is it $30 million? We'll give you what is owed left on this current year right now.
Okay, but that's a huge gulf between them right now, right? And Stephen, if you're waiting for your money, he's got what, 2 years, $54 million? Am I pulling those numbers out correctly? If you're the player, how much are you giving up off of $54 million?
That's a good question. And is it any way he can make up for that the $80 million?
Well, that was the question going into July. When we get into the summer with cap space, would Leon Rose go out and get a market for Carmelo to make up the difference there? Right. Now, but we're 3 weeks into the summer. That market has certainly, like Dwayne Wade did last year, that market has dried up right now.
Right. And that will get back to how badly Carmelo wants to get out of New York, that he may have to sacrifice a few $1 million, or there's a number there to
How
find.
Much is
not $8.
Few.
Whatever that number is. Like now, my sources tell me he is willing to trade. He is willing to waive that no trade clause, as Bobby said, or the trade kicker, which is worth about $8 million. So he could allow. That makes it a little easier for Houston to do a trade. But again, it is hard to match the pieces up in this. And as Bobby said, it will be a dance to get to that buyout and what the number is going to be. But right now, it is really hard for those two sides to find a trade because they almost have to go back to square one. Like I said, my sources tell me Portland they don't want to be a part of this right now. And it's almost a complete reset button now for Houston to start a whole new package with. Scott Perry's a new general manager. He wants to negotiate his own trade with them. He didn't negotiate that Houston deal that was proposed, so they have to start this over.
Right, but it makes, I think, to the Melo side, I keep hearing from the player side that, hey, look, Steve Mills has been there the whole time. It's not that Scott Perry just came in and now, oh, Phil's gone, Scott's there, everything's different. A lot of the people in the front office are still in the front office. It doesn't feel to me that his opinion has changed that much on his feel about the Knicks.
It hasn't, and the fact that Carmelo did not easily come to a decision to waive his no trade, it took months, almost a year, for Carmelo to get to a point where he was ready to leave. He's not going to just immediately have a meeting with them and say, okay, forget all this, let's go back to this. Carmelo labored over that decision, and it was an organizational, it was an ownership decision. Steve Mills, Phil Jackson. Phil was the front man on going after him publicly, but he wasn't alone in it, and Carmelo's camp knows that.
And no one stopped him, and that was a big factor with the organization, too. We're going to let you go, but first I just want to ask you about the Kristaps Porzingis side of this as well, because you and I were talking before the show, and you said, yeah, Melo, but also they got to fix the relationship with Kristaps. How big of a gulf is that right now?
It's big, and I think Scott Perry, Steve Mills, as soon as they get through with their press conference today, sooner than later, they need to be on a plane to Europe and go sit with Kristaps Porzingis. They never should have let him leave New York without going to his apartment and talking to him. Phil Jackson, they did. They have a lot of repairing. And I think what Scott Perry's got to tell Kristaps, this is going to be a professional work environment. That's been Kristaps' frustration with New York. It was how unprofessional the environment was. Scott's got to convince him that that's going to change.
And I think the Knicks, they need to show some good faith with Melo because he could have handled the situation totally different. He could have been in the media, being a jerk, being low like Phil was. I think they need to show him some good faith and help him get this deal done.